Our second speaker is Dr. Raja Dixit, who is very distinguished and versatile scholar with around 40 years of teaching experience. He began his long innings in the Department of History at Fergusson College. From there, he moved on to Pune University, where he had held many important posts in the Department of History and in the Interdisciplinary School, Humanities and Social Science. He has published many books and articles in English and Marathi and has received numerous awards and honors. At present, he is a member of the Indian Council of Historical Research (ICHR), New Delhi, and a member of the Board of Trustees, Indian Institute of Education (IIE), Pune. Besides academic, he is too very creative. He has about 100 poems, 4 short stories, and 1 act play to his credit. Sir, we are truly honored to have you with us this morning. We are sure that your talk will enrich us.
Honorable Chairperson, Mr. Neeraj Jain, my co-speakers, Professor Pradeep Gokhale, Mr. Harvinder Singh, and Professor V. Sebastian. Father Peter D. Cruz, who is the director of Snehasadan, that has organized this seminar. And actually, this reminds me of my college days when I had heard about Father Dalari and Father, Matthew Leatherley. And later on, when I started studying the history of modern Maharashtra, I came across the book, a very brilliant work by Dr. Leatherley, Philosophical Trends in Maharashtra, that was published in 1976. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, student friends, all the office bearers of the college and Snehasadan, let me at the outset thank the organizers for inviting me to make this presentation. It's a very difficult task because as Professor Gokhale has said, religion plays a different kind of role and aims at the welfare of humanity. It many times transcends the limits of the nation and nationalism. But at the same time, religion plays a complementary role to the process of nation building. If seen with the wider perspective, religion plays this role. And if taken into consideration some narrow acts of the followers of certain religions, religion also can hamper the process of nation building. But considering the thrust of the topic of the seminar, I shall be concentrating on the positive or constructive role of religion in the process of nation building, with special reference to Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, the ruler from the medieval India. Well, that was the age of nation states or nationalism. And that's why, again, this is a very difficult task. Talking about a modern day thinker is easier in the context of this theme. But taking into account the role of a medieval ruler in nation building is very challenging. And I shall venture at that, of course. First, we have to remember one thing, and let me clarify that I am standing here not as a representative or advocate of Hinduism, but as a student of history looking at Hinduism as one historical factor, that's all. And that's why about some aspects of Hinduism, my views are very critical also. For example, as Professor Gokhale was mentioning, the caste system or gender inequality, these things are not acceptable to me. But here, I am speaking about the ideal structure of Hinduism, the basic philosophical structure of Hinduism, which is in a way greatly democratic. And that's why I believe that it is complementary to the process of nation building. we have to keep in mind one more thing, that we have to be very careful about the communal history writing. There is no scope to go into the details of this, but as I could see many students there, I would like to make a mention to one small booklet that was authored by three prominent historians, Romila Thapar, Harbans Mukhiya, and Bipan Chandra, about the communal history writing. When I used to teach my students anything pertaining to religion or the leaders of different religions, I used to follow the guidelines provided by these three historians. So if we keep aside the communal viewpoint of history and look at such themes in a very constructive approach, then the result could be better. And I shall be aiming at that only. As I have mentioned in my summary, of course, I won't be following each and every point from my summary. I have stated there that Hinduism is a broad-based religion giving space to a number of sects, schools, sacred texts, ideas and practices. This is conducive to unity in diversity and diversities in unity that have always been important characteristics of our national identity. So Hinduism is like a banyan tree and tries to accommodate different ideological currents, different sects, even the atheist tradition. And if we think about this particular structure of Hinduism, it is in a way a democratic structure, and through respecting diversities, Hinduism tried to build a feeling of oneness which is complementary to the nation building. In this sense, Hinduism is important in this particular context. Now I shall directly come to Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, because the time at my disposal is just about half an hour. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, he was a Hindu ruler from Maharashtra, known for his benevolence and religious toleration, facilitating nation building. But before coming to his achievements, let me say something about the background of the building of Swaraj by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Because history is, after all, a story of continuity and change. It is a kind of dialectical story of continuity and change. And that's why we have to remember one thing, that once upon a time, the imperialist historians, they regarded the rise of the Marathas as an accidental event in history. For example, Grand Duff had compared this rise of Maratha power with the forest fire. But historians like Ranade, Justice M.G. Ranade, they tried to show how this process was a kind of evolutionary process. And in that context, we must remember that the real background of the creation of Swaraj was created by the medieval Marathi saint poets. This Bhakti movement in medieval Maharashtra, actually Bhakti movement all over India, was a kind of progressive movement because it denounced the ritualistic kind of religion and preached the ideal religious principles that were easier for common man to comprehend and to follow. And the Bhakti movement also actually preached the religion in the languages of the people, thus encouraging the vernaculars and the vernacular literature too. Same is true about Maharashtra. The Bhakti movement in Maharashtra was not merely a religious movement, but it was a broad-based movement. I mean, if you read G.B. Sardar's book, Santa Vangmayachi Samajik Falashruti, and the English translation is also available, you would get the details about this. But the point here is, the medieval Marathi Bhakti saint poets, they first preached the ideal religious principles through the Marathi language and created a pride for the Marathi language. After all, nation is a feeling of oneness, based on the feeling of oneness, which is created by many factors. Those who are the political science students, they know that language is one factor, common language, common religion, common history, common culture, geographical contiguity, etc. But the unique thing about India is that, because in case of many nations in the world, there is one religion, one language, and based on that their nation grew. Such is not the case of India. India is a multi-religious country. And that's why we have to remember one thing, that though we are speaking about one particular religion separately, we have to keep in mind that all the religions in India, the original Indian religions, that is Vedic or Hindu religion, Buddhism, Jainism, later on Sikhism, and the religions coming from outside, like Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and Zoroastrianism, all these religions have played a great role in the process of nation building and in the process of building the Indian culture. It is a collective achievement of all these religious and cultural groups that we have to keep in mind. I just would like to mention one example. When the Persians, when the Zoroastrians, they came to India, Persians, I don't know whether this really happened, but this story is always narrated, that when they landed at the western coast of India, they had a meeting with the local king and some of his bearers and the villagers, and the leader of the Parsi group, he asked for a cup of milk and a little bit of sugar. And when it was provided, he just added sugar into the milk, stirred it, and said that, well, the sugar has been absorbed in the milk and it has added sweetness to it. Just like that, we shall mix in your society in the same way and the result will be very sweet. I think this is applicable to all the religions in India. Now, in case of Shivaji Maharaj, you will find that he was a Hindu ruler, but he was not a Hindu ruler in the narrow sense. But here we have to, I would like to highlight 2 points. One, the history of Shivaji could be studied in 2 different phases. One, 1630 to 1680, that is the lifetime of Shivaji, but 2, 1680 to 2020. Because the remaining phase, that is the period after Shivaji Maharaj, we find that though Shivaji was not there, his influence was there. And his role, even after his death, in nation building is very important. And that's why we will have to study that process also. That is one thing. Secondly, we have to remember one thing, that the age of Shivaji Maharaj was not the age of democracy, age of nationalism, age of secularism. So there is no point in imposing these qualities on Shivaji Maharaj. Sometimes that is done in a very blind manner. But we have to understand that though he was not a democratic ruler, it was a kingship. He was pro-people. He worked for the welfare of the people. Though he was not a secular ruler, he is known for his religious toleration. And though that was not the age of nationalism, he carved out something that could be called as a proto-nation state. That is something like nation state within the limits of the medieval framework. This we have to keep in mind. Now, since there is no time, I shall just highlight some 2 or 3 points. Shivaji, at the beginning of his career as a ruler, he made a seal. Pratipachandra Lekhewa Vardishnur Vishwavandita Shah Suno Shivasesha Mudra Bhadraya Rajate. What was that seal? It says, ever growing in splendor, like the moon of the first day of the bright half of the month, and adored by the world, this seal of Shivaji, the son of Shahaji, shines for the benediction of all. So this point, benediction of all, that was very important. And throughout his life, he followed this principle. And that was, I think, because of the influence of medieval Marathi Bhagavad Dharma. Because, as I said, they did not merely preach the religious principles, but they denounced the rituals, they, denounced the caste distinctions. For example, Tukaram saying, तुका म्हणे नाही जाती सवे काम ज्याचे मुखी राम तोची धन्य वर्ण अभिमाने कोण झाला पावन द्यायसे सांगून मज प्रती etc. Many examples could be cited. So he denounced the caste differences. Then in the brotherhood of the Marathi saint poets, we find that there were the saint poets from different caste groups, right, from Brahmins to untouchables. Just take the example of Sautamadi. He belonged to the untouchable caste, but he was accepted in the brotherhood. Women were accepted. Even there were many Muslim saints. The best example is that of Sheikh Muhammad, who is known for his Yoga Sangram. He was a Muslim devotee of Lord Krishna. So they preached this kind of Hindu-Muslim unity. Just take the example of the Bharud by Sant Eknath, Hindu-Turka Samvad. There is no scope to explain the whole thing, but that Bharud preaches the Hindu-Muslim unity. That is important. And these Marathi saints, they brought about the reconciliation of the conflicting factors even at the philosophical level. That is Saguna, Nirguna, Dvaita, Advaita, etc. So through all these activities, they created a new enthusiasm in the medieval Marathi society and created a kind of new identity of the Marathi speaking people. And that identity was used by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj to create unity, to channelize all the patriotic all the currents in one patriotic current, and building a state that was for the people. And this is important. And while doing so, he employed many Muslims, for example, in both his military as well as civil administration. As far as Shivaji's policy is concerned, just see what Khafi Khan, who was the historian from the side of Aurangzeb and who has otherwise used abusive language for the Marathas and even for Shivaji Maharaj, just see what he says about Shivaji Maharaj. So I need not even elaborate that. I shall just read out that small passage.
Can you repeat the name of the historian? The name of the
Khafi Khan, contemporary historian from the side of Aurangzeb. Khafi Khan says, Shivaji had always striven to maintain the honor of the people in his territories and was careful to maintain the honor of women and children of Mohammedans when they fell into his hands. His injunctions upon this point were very strict, and anyone who disobeyed them received punishments. He made it a rule that whenever his followers went plundering, they should do no harm to the mosques, the book of God, or the women of anyone. Whenever a copy of the sacred Quran came into his hands, he treated it with respect and gave it to some of his Muslim followers. Another example, Shivaji had written a letter to Aurangzeb condemning the imposition of jizya tax. Just see what Shivaji says. I shall just read out 2 sentences from that. He says, in fact, Islam and Hinduism are both beautiful manifestations of the divine spirit. Anyone bearing fanaticism and religious hatred must be said to be acting against the command of God. So such were the broad views of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. I can give you many examples, but that would require a series of lectures, so I won't go into that. Let me come to the period after the death of Shivaji. Shivaji proved to be, Shivaji created a nation state of medieval kind, and because of that, after his death, when Aurangzeb stationed himself with his mighty power in Maharashtra, trying to crush the Maratha power, he could not do so. He could capture the Maratha king Sambhaji and tortured him to death, but for 25 long years, the Marathas fought the war of independence and they could not be crushed. Rather, this venture of Aurangzeb led to, that was one of the causes, the decline of the Mughal Empire. And that's why the historian Vincent Smith had said that Deccan was the grave of Aurangzeb's reputation as well as his body, which is absolutely true. So this is one thing, that even after his death, due to the spirit of patriotism and feeling of oneness created by him, the Marathas not only survived, but in the 18th century, they became a major power of India, and that's why the British had to finally defeat the Marathas for subjugating India. This is a reality, historical reality, which is greatly neglected by many historians because our history, written history and history courses are north-centric. But Maratha history should be perceived from this perspective also. And during the age of Indian Renaissance, Chhatrapati Shivaji proved to be a great source of inspiration for social reformers like Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, for political leaders like Lokmanya Tilak, and for cultural leaders like Rabindranath Tagore also. Shivaji was not only respected in Maharashtra but all over India. For example, the Shivaji cult became very popular in Bengal thanks to Deuskar and thanks to Lokmanya Tilak. And it became popular quite early. I shall just give you one example. The famous economic historian R.C. Dutt from Bengal, he was also a novelist. And in late 1870s, he wrote a novel, Maharashtra Jivan Prabhat. And the hero of that novel was Shivoba. So he was greatly influenced by Shivaji. Rabindranath Tagore had composed a poem on Shivaji, Jaya to Shivaji. By the way, Tagore also had translated some of the abhangas of Saint Tukaram into Bengali. So this we have to take into account, that Shivaji proved to be a source of inspiration in nation building all over India. And that role is very important. And even today, in the post-independence period also, Shivaji is our national symbol. But here, I would like to give a word of caution. I think my time is almost over, but within some 3 or 4 minutes I shall conclude. Here, I would like to share one thought with you. And that is, whenever we study the achievements of the heroes of history, we have to remember one thing, that sometimes, especially in recent years, that tendency is growing in India. Sometimes there is a kind of hijacking of the heroes of history. Mahapurushanche Apaharan. Heroes are hijacked for the narrow purpose, and they are glorified and deified by the people to promote their narrow interests, building the divisions among the people. That should not be done. Even this has happened in case of Shivaji Maharaj. His name has been misused by many people. His history has been distorted by many people, and that has created the problem. And even today, we are facing these problems, even in Maharashtra. People are very fanatic about this, and that should not be encouraged actually. And that's why I have nowadays coined one term, and in all such public gatherings, I make a mention to that, that many of our problems today, history related problems, because it is becoming even to write a textbook, history textbook. I was associated with that process right from KG to PG. And it is becoming very difficult because of these narrow feelings of the people. So, I think that this is because we greatly lack in what could be called as historical literacy. We are historically very illiterate. And one way of curbing such evils is to create historical literacy. And that's why the crucial question is how we perceive Shivaji. No doubt, Shivaji Maharaj was a great ruler. But what was his real greatness? That greatness was probably put forward by Mahatma Jyotiba Phule in his ballad on Shivaji. Because the image of Shivaji Maharaj depicted by Mahatma Phule was that of Rayatesa Raja. That is the ruler of common people, working for the good of common people, cutting across the caste lines, cutting across the religious lines. And that's why we have to remember one thing, that Shivaji Maharaj is not a monopoly of any particular caste. It is not a monopoly of any particular religion. It is not a monopoly of any particular region. But Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj is our nation builder, and it is Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj is a national symbol. Even today, providing us a great inspiration in nation building. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
About Hinduism, some scholars say that it is not a religion as such, and some of the things like, this Hindu word has come from Persia. They could not say Sindhu, so they use this word Hindu, and then Hindu, they refer to the people beyond the Sindh river, this side, inside, which is known presently as India. So it is a geographical term, Hindu, rather than religious term. That's one thing. Then next question. Yeah, in Vedas there is no idolatry. That's what I read somewhere. And third one, when Shivaji wanted to be coronated, we read it in the history books of the school children also, no? So that Gaga Bhatt had to be invited from Banaras. Local Brahmin priests refused to coronate him. That's one thing. Is it true? Then fourth question, last one. Ramdas, Sant Ramdas, who is depicted as the guru of Shivaji, actually he did not exist. Brahmins inserted Ramdas to get, to create an image that Shivaji had a lot of respect for Brahmins, etc., etc., for their own self-interest. These are the questions. Thank you.
About the name Hinduism, I agree with you. Basically, the word or term Hindu was used by the Persians. Due to the regular sound shift between the Sanskrit and Persian languages, the Sanskrit S was pronounced as H in Persian, and that's why Sindhu was pronounced as Hindu. So basically, it was a geographical term, and that's why the original religion was called as Sanatan Dharma or Vedic Dharma. But I agree with you that. Second question I could not actually hear clearly, but the last thing about Ramdas, let me say something about that. This is a controversial matter. This is raising great controversy today, and the theme is emotionally handled by many people. Whether Ramdas was the guru of Shivaji or not, that could be debatable. I mean, there is no clear evidence showing that Saint Ramdas was a guru of Shivaji Maharaj. But one thing is very clear, that both of them, they were contemporary, one thing. Secondly, it appears that they had the mutual respect. And Ramdas, he wrote about Shivaji Maharaj. The way he wrote about Shivaji Maharaj clearly indicates that he, in some way or the other, directly or indirectly, he was associated with this process of nation making. महाराष्ट्र धर्म वाढवावा, मराठा ते तुका मिळवावा. And what he wrote about Chhatrapati Shivaji, he has described Shivaji in two ways, and I think those are two very effective ways. One, he described him as Janata Raja, the king with great maturity, and maturity in a very broader sense. And more important than that, Bahuta Janasi Adharu, that is sound support of majority of the people. I mean, that means I think this was the first great biography of Shivaji Maharaj, whatever Ramdas had written. And that's why the work of Saint Ramdas, like other saint poets also, proved to be complementary to the political activities of Shivaji. That's all. Whether he was Guru or not, that is immaterial. And as I said, there is no clear evidence showing that he was Guru. And in every matter, Shivaji Maharaj used to go to him for advice. No, that is not true. You know, again, this was a political issue actually. Shivaji Maharaj, he had created his own state, but he wanted kind of legitimacy for that. This question of legitimacy always comes. Merely saying that, well, I am the ruler of this state is not sufficient for the people. And since he was a Hindu ruler, he wanted to perform the coronation ceremony according to Hindu rites. So he, and Kashi or Banaras had a special status in those days. That's why this Gaga Bhatt was invited for that purpose, for performing the coronation ceremony. That was done. It gave some legitimacy, and this was a public demonstration of the fact that Shivaji had emerged as a Chhatrapati, the ruler of the Maratha state. As far as the question of idolatry is concerned, Vedic religion, especially the early Vedic religion, was the religion of nature worship, and that's why there was no idol worship, image worship as such. And later on, in course of time, that practice developed in Hinduism. That was accepted by many, but there were some other people who refused to accept this practice also. For example, during the modern period of religious and social reform movement, the body like Prarthana Samaj refused to follow the practice of idolatry. They said that way, well, we believe in God. They were greatly influenced by Tukaram and other Marathi saint poets. But they said that we believe in the principle of monotheism, only one God, and we don't practice idolatry. That's why they had a Hari Mandir, but there was no idol in that mandir. They used to gather there, and even today that practice goes on. Especially on Sunday, they come together and offer a praying, thinking about the welfare of mankind. I can't say that like the modern crusaders against caste system, Shivaji was a reformer. I can't say that. Shivaji had to work within that structure, but he did not follow the caste system in a very blind fashion. That is important. And that's why some of the caste injunctions or some of the caste rules were put aside by Shivaji. For example, there was a great discrimination as far as giving punishment to the persons belonging to different castes. Brahmana dhala kitihi brashta tari to tini loki sreshta. But Shivaji had clearly stated that if found guilty, even a Brahmin must be punished severely. That was stated. Brahman asla tari त्याचा मुलाहिजा ठेवू नये. He stated that. Mulahija, that means you should not be very sympathetic about that and give concession to him if he has committed a crime. So this is one example. Secondly, he brought together the people of different castes, and there were, caste system is based on some vocations. Traditionally, they follow the same vocation. But taking into account that, he made effective use of people belonging to different castes. For example, in his fort administration, a specific duty was given to a Maratha, a specific duty was given to a Mahar. I mean, that was done by him. That is also one important factor. And sometimes, that was the age of untouchability also. But see how he was sympathetic about the untouchable subjects also. I shall just give one example. His revenue, he had reformed his revenue system, and generally he used to collect the revenues in cash. That was one of the measures of reform. But one cobbler from a rural area, he had made an appeal, an application to Shivaji that, well, I am not in a position to pay my revenue in cash. So please allow me to pay the revenue in kind. आम्हाकडून ऐन जिनसी घेणे, ऐन जिनसी. That is in the form of some, kind, some commodities. And when Shivaji received this request, he gave an order that, well, from this particular person, the revenue should be collected in the form of kind. So, if we take into account all such examples, we can say that though caste system prevailed, he did not abolish the caste system, he did not abolish the untouchability. Sometimes, काय म्हणतो त्याला आपण गोत सभा, that is the caste council, he had to accept the decisions of caste council. There are some such examples. But though he did not abolish the caste system, just as he did not abolish the Watan system, he was forward looking and he did not necessarily follow all the caste rules, and his policy pertaining to this was quite liberal as compared to other rulers during that period.
We have some evidence of people in his administration belonging to various castes outside their professions, in the sense that, say for instance, the Dalits being given important positions in the army, for example. Do we have some evidence of that?
Important position in the army, I don't know. They were recruited in the army, but sometimes keeping aside the profession, for example, Brahmins, they were supposed to do the priestly duties. But during Shivaji's time, some Brahmins, they accepted the military professions. This happened. So,
The lower castes.
lower caste, they were not necessarily the holding the higher posts. And that's why I said that he worked within that medieval limitation. But Muslims, yes. Muslims, they held some positions of eminence. No, Ibrahim Gardi during the Peshwai period. Yeah. No. He was the chief of the artillery at the time of the Battle of Panipat. Yeah. But that happened during the Peshwa period.
That is later.
For example, Holkar, who belonged to the Dhangar community, he rose to the position of eminence. That happened. Or, some new mobility was growing in the 18th century, and that is why we find that at the time of that Battle of Udgir, Bhausaheb Peshwa, he placed an order of 5,000 cannon balls to a person who was a Kasar by caste, Appaji Kokil Kasar. So, Bengal trade, that was his occupation, but he entered into this occupation and started producing the cannon balls and provided those to the Maratha military machine.
But this was post Shivaji.
Post Shivaji. But I think this, the background for this was created by Shivaji. I mean, we have to look into that perspective, continuity and change.